Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duckbricks, and welcome to another LEGO Avatar set review, where so far we have been reviewing every single one of the minifigure scale or minifig compatible sets based off of the very first Avatar movie, all the way leading up to a mega review showcasing all of these sets put together. This is set number 75573, Floating Mountains Site 26 and RDA Sampson. This is a really interesting one because it actually focuses more on the human side of things with the militaristic vehicles, one of their bases, but also has some foliage and even one of the animal creatures as well, which is of course a brand new mold for the theme. Now, one of the most exciting things about doing these mega reviews is that at the end, once we actually combine all of these sets together, every single set is built to work with each other, and all of the foliage pieces actually do connect and form a much larger diorama display. So do stay tuned, because as we continue to publish more reviews, this is the second to last one, and we will be putting out a mega review showcasing all of these sets put together. But so without further ado, I think it's time to jump right into the set. Let's take a look at set number 75573.
Alright, so here we have set number 75573, Floating Mountains, Site 26, and RDA Sampson. This is a set that retails for $100 and comes with 5 minifigures, 2 of which being Pandorans, or I guess in this case avatars who are made to be Pandorans, and 3 regular human figures, which are some of the rarer figures of the line because typically we just got a lot of sets focused on the Pandorans themselves. This is one of the only Avatar sets that doesn't actually focus on a large piece of nature or a creature, instead choosing to focus on the hero human faction. This was particularly one of the kind of modules of their base that they established up in the mountains near the second half of the movie, and we also have one of the famous icons of Avatar, which are these kind of floating helicopters or drone copter type things. There of course is a little bit of foliage, as you can see here, basically just a pedestal for the helicopter and flying vehicle itself, but for the most part, this is kind of just its own standalone thing based on the human factions, which is interesting because most of the other sets don't do that, and LEGO designers have actually explicitly stated that they wanted these sets to mostly just focus on the nature and wildlife of Pandora, making this rather large set one of the outliers in the LEGO Avatar wave. But is it worth $100? Well, you can probably guess what I'm going to say to that, but we'll take a closer look on the review and let me explain what I think of this set. Because out of all of the Avatar sets, I'm going to be completely honest, this one feels the most overpriced to me. That being said, there's still a lot of really good stuff to see in the set. It's not even that egregiously overpriced compared to many of LEGO's other offerings nowadays. I just feel that some of the sets are actually much better value. Like for instance, the Flying Creatures set, Jake and Neytiri's first Banshee flight was $60, which I think was pretty good value for it, and even the largest set, the Taruk Maktu and Tree of Souls for $150, offers just so much more than this. But now let's take a look at the set itself. Okay, so here we have the main build of the set. We have, again, this foliage tower, one of the helicopters, as well as a selection of 5 different minifigures, one of which is piloting the vehicle here, plus a base that actually has a good amount of detail packed into it, and you can actually see and open up pretty much all of it. This is one of the dire horses, or pali. They were the horses that the natives used mostly throughout the movie to get around. They actually have a very defining feature in that these have 6 legs instead of 4 like the traditional horse, and of course that warranted a brand new mold, which fits in with LEGO's design standards of making animals and horse-like creatures, but offers us something completely different. One thing I find really cool are the nostrils on the side of the neck, which is a similar detail to many of the other Avatar creatures, which we took a look at in the other sets, and of course the dual molding of the blue stripe going alongside the top here is just really cool to see. Now, after watching the movie, I'm not honestly really sure if they actually got the coloration right here. There was a lot of detail to these dire horses in the films themselves, a lot of different shades of blue going downwards, and they did tend to feel like they were a darker blue than this kind of medium azure or lighter blue color which we see from LEGO. However, I'm not really sure how LEGO would have replicated the exact look and feel of the dire horses because they had just so much different shades of blue going from the top and going down here, whereas this feels like an okay compromise. Maybe it should have been a darker shade overall than have the top part be dark blue instead of just the regular blue, but I don't know. It's not too bad, I just feel like the coloration just isn't quite perfect. Otherwise, the mold is really cool, and I am very happy to actually get a brand new animal in LEGO form. Moving on from the horse though, let's now take a look at the main build of the base itself here. This is the Site 26 base, which was established in the Floating Mountains. In the movie itself, it was kind of two of these stacked together, but I understand they wanted to just focus on one. You can actually remove this entire wall section here. This whole thing comes off, and rotating this around, you can actually see there is a lot of attention to detail being paid to the inside of the kind of base area itself. You've got some control readouts here showcasing some of the details of the world of Avatar. This, for instance, was actually a direct screen from the movie itself, which is showing the brain of the minifigure kind of interfacing with the Avatar itself. And then you even have one of the chambers where you can place one of the minifigures inside here to kind of go to sleep and wake up in their Avatar forms. Let me showcase that with Sigourney Weaver's character here. You've got her laying down like so. And then you can just simply close this up and have it be good to go. And there you can see a sticker showing the vitals readout, which is pretty cool to see. Overall, this is a good space to pose minifigures in, to play around with, and thankfully there is a lot of open space to have figures peering through the windows or through the front door. Overall, just a nice empty space for the figures to go around in. Now, closing this back up, you can see that the overall thing is pretty compact. This is a very, very compact LEGO build right here, and there are pros and cons to it, because it being so compact allowed them to actually pack in a good amount of detail into the build itself and the shaping of this particular lab. This definitely has a lot of reuse potential, even outside of just Avatar, by being just kind of a sci-fi-like base. But I can't help but wonder, for $100, could they have at least included the other capsule as well? That way they could have actually had room for 2 pods, because they do include 2 figures to actually go into the pods in the set itself, but they only have 1 pod. So I think they probably could have managed to just duplicate this, have a connecting section, and just have a second stack of it, make it more accurate to the movie. And to be honest, I think they could have squeezed that in, maybe just skimped a little bit on the external detail by just featuring that, which I think would have been more accurate and also had a lot more depth and stuff to do with the set itself. Moving on though to the helicopter build as well as the foliage, this is as usual a really nice integration of the wildlife of Pandora into the build itself. As we mentioned in the reviews of the other sets, you actually have a brand new set of glow-in-the-dark elements being introduced for Avatar. Shutting the light off here, you can really see that these crown elements have a very strong glow to them. And after you actually combine all the foliage pieces together, it is just so satisfying to see that strong glow coming through, because it's really cool to just see the amount of effort they put into the placement of the glowing parts. Even though there's only 3 of them, it just looks really cool here, and I really like how they actually managed to include glowing elements to every single one of the Avatar builds. Now, the helicopter itself, let me just actually remove this so we can take a closer look. It's just attached by a single Technic pin, which is a very, very flimsy solution, which I was kind of surprised that it was holding on by literally just 1 pin, but I guess the base is strong enough that it worked out. We'll take a look at that in 1 second, but I just want to spend a little bit of time looking at the foliage itself. I love the reuse of the Lego Mario tower piece in clear. This was introduced to kind of act as a support beam for some of the Lego Super Mario buildable course sets, but they actually reused it for Avatar. They specifically mentioned that they were actually initially having the towers being built out of black bricks, and then just kind of hoping that the builders would kind of ignore them and pretend they were seeping into the background. But then when they saw the Super Mario team was developing this element, they decided to kind of co-opt it for the Avatar sets, and man am I glad they did that, because this really does feel like rocks are floating, which is really what you want to see. I love the way they have vines kind of creeping around, and overall, just a really solid piece of terrain build for something that isn't even really featured on the box art of the set itself. The set pretty much just advertises the main base and the helicopter, and you can kind of see bits and pieces of this in the background, but I think this is probably one of the strongest parts of the set. And again, much like many of the other Avatar sets, this works really well as both a play model and a display model, where you actually can use the helicopter, which is very swooshable mind you, to just sit there and be mounted on the top. But setting all these aside, I think it's time we actually take a closer look at this vehicle itself. We'll remove the pilot to take a look at the minifigures later on, but let's just take a closer look at this particular helicopter vehicle. I think this is probably the most perfect representation we would have gotten for these vehicles in LEGO form. I really like how they actually do feature the dual propellers, which was a very prominent feature of these builds in the movie itself, and the moment that I saw these round Technic circular pieces being used for LEGO Friends last year, I knew they just had to make a helicopter with them, and indeed they did. I was really surprised that these pieces actually specifically originated from the LEGO Friends Circus lineup. I did buy quite a few of those sets. Those were really good sets, but they were essentially used to kind of form amusement park things for acrobats to twirl around in, but they're also the perfect shape for these round helicopter guard pieces, and they honestly kind of remind me of Snap in a way, in that they're very curved and just have some Technic holes. I don't know, you tell me. Does this look like Snap to you? Anyways, moving on to the back of the model, you can see some nice detailing on the top as well, with some of these angled elements kind of forming the shaping on the inside of the copter itself. It is a fairly simple helicopter build, but it does feel just a little bit more special than typical LEGO helicopters, just because of just that much more level of detail being integrated into it. You've got some of the newer forms of stud shooters here. And then of course the cockpit itself is a printed element. They are printing one of the Speed Champion style windscreens here, which you can see like so, but it's just a special print for the helicopters. And then inside you have a very simple seat for the pilot and control rod. Nothing too crazy going on. But with that, I think it's time to kind of just summarize the set in terms of value. And that's the big question, because I honestly feel that for $100, I kind of wish that there was something a little bit more. Now, I know that the price per part ratio is something that some people use, other people don't. I know that there is a very good argument to not use it, because a lot of things go beyond price per part, and sometimes you'll get a very small and detailed build that takes up a lot of pieces, or other times, like in LEGO City, you seem to have a very bad price per part ratio, but that's because a lot of the pieces are larger and more simplified. For this though, I do kind of want to take a look, because I do feel like it is pretty relevant to this particular build. The part count for the set is 887, making the price per piece over 10 cents. It's actually at 11.3 cents if you do the math. And that, I don't know, that feels not so great to me. I definitely would have wanted to see a little bit more in terms of detail or something more substantial for this set in particular, just to have a little bit more extra for $100. And compared to other Avatar sets, for say the $60 Jake and Neytiri's First Flight, or even the $45 Neytiri and Thanator versus AMP Suit Quaritch, those provided a lot more play value than this, where you don't really have any enemies. Every single person here is aligned on the same faction. Sure, you could maybe pretend that the helicopter is one of the villain ones, because of course they started off as the company helicopters, so you could repurpose this as one of the bad guy helicopters. But honestly, for the most part, this is just kind of an expansion set to some of the other LEGO Avatar stuff, and I definitely feel that there is something missing in terms of either conflict in a box or some sort of extra detail to make this set pop. That being said, it is just me. I do think this is the weakest of the LEGO Avatar sets, but I could be wrong on that, so I definitely want to hear what your thoughts are on the set and what you think of the wave as a whole. Here are the minifigures of set number 75573 Floating Mountains, Site 26, and RDA Sampson, plus one of the dire horses included in the set as well. And these minifigures are honestly probably some of the best we get throughout the entire theme. I think the set does provide us with a very good range of figures, including 2 avatars or 2 Pandoran-style characters, and 3 humans plus 1 Pandoran creature, which kind of balances it out a little bit. Obviously, I've spoken a lot about these previously, so I won't just rehash my own thoughts. I like the inclusion of the Woody arms and legs returning from LEGO Toy Story, which was a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one, although I do feel that the prints of the faces maybe could have been improved a little bit. The noses on the characters feel a tad awkward to me, especially because obviously LEGO characters don't typically have noses, but for the most part, I think they're okay. No major complaints on my end, and if LEGO decided to kind of keep using them for the rest of the LEGO Avatar sets without any changes, I certainly wouldn't mind that, which of course it seems like they're doing. Of course, the figures do introduce new hair pieces, and that is one complaint of the Avatar line. They only made 2 new hair pieces for the figures, one male and one female, so it does tend to kind of result in figures who aren't quite accurate compared to the source material. Thankfully, they're fixing that by the time the Way of Water sets come out, but it's almost like too little too late. There are now figures in the line, which we'll take a look at in our next set, that are very much inaccurate compared to their screen counterparts because they're just using the wrong style of hair. That being said, these 2 characters here, not too bad. They generally work okay with this style of hair. Now, LEGO actually introduced a brand new mold in this set as well. This is a new version of the wheelchair, or I guess a couple new molds because the wheels themselves are also new. They actually had to remodel the wheelchair piece, which was already in existence, because the old one could not fit through doors, which was pretty crucial for this particular set. So they actually redesigned the entire wheelchair to allow it to fit through doors, which I think is just a good step in the right direction in general. I think it makes sense for minifigure wheelchairs, whether it be Avatar or not, to be able to fit through doors. And that makes a lot of sense to me. Now, Jake here actually has a set of new prints for himself, and this is probably one of the only times we're ever getting a human Jake figure, if you know what happens at the end of the first Avatar movie. Now, I really like how they printed the mask on the face here, which is a really cool addition for them going into the Avatar kind of chamber. But then, of course, you have this other standard head here. To be completely honest, I think that this head is maybe just a little bit too basic for the character itself. It doesn't really look like the actor too much, and it feels like a generic head, and it feels strange to me that they actually made a set of brand new prints with the mask on if the other side of the face is just going to look that generic anyways. Why didn't they just reuse an existing face? But that being said, I do think that the character likenesses are much better captured for some of the other characters here. I think one of these standouts here is the Dr. Grace Augustine figure because she actually introduces a set of dual molded legs with printing on the side of the legs, which is pretty special for a standard minifigure, which is really cool. I think the headpiece in particular is a great likeness of Sigourney Weaver, where you can see with the expression and the hair, that is pretty perfect for her character and the actress in the film, so it's kind of surprising to me how well they got this figure correct and how much the other Jake figure feels very generic, but maybe his character was just a little generic to begin with. Now, of course, they actually do print the mask on the back of the head as well, which I think is a really cool addition, setting these figures apart, and overall, this is probably one of the highlight figures of the set in terms of detail, just with that dual molding and the printing on the sides of the legs, which is just truly fantastic. In contrast, the Trudy figure is fairly simple, but I do actually think this is a really good figure in terms of replicating the likeness of the actress as well. I really like the inclusion of the kind of paint here, which you can see on the face itself. And then of course you have just the standard face, which I think is a good kind of depiction of the character as well. I kind of wish that at least one of these heads had her with sunglasses on. I think it's really cool that we actually have it with the war paint from the end of the film, but I also would have thought it would be really cool to actually see her with sunglasses because she kind of just wore shades for most of the film. So while I do like this expression, and while it's good to get somewhat generic new female expressions for different skin tones for LEGO, I think these sunglasses would have been a welcome addition. But maybe if we were to ever get more Avatar 1 sets, maybe we would see this character appear again. It even includes her silver necklace, which was something special to the character in the film. All in all, I think the minifigure selection from this particular set is one of the strongest out of all of the Avatar sets. The Na'vi figures are quite good in terms of their detail. It is fantastic, one thing I didn't mention, fantastic to get the long woody legs in a plain color that is unprinted. Those dark tan woody legs are going to be so useful, and 5 minifigures is a good amount, especially for an $100 set. Sure, maybe it would have been nicer to get just 1 more or 2 more for a set this expensive, but for the figures that we get, they are quite good, and I especially love the detail on Dr. Augustine here with the printing on the sides of the legs and dual molded legs. That is something truly special. But with that, we have summed up the minifigures from this set.
Alright, and with that, we have summed up our look at set number 75573, the Floating Mountains and Site 26, and this was a really interesting set that's a little bit different from some of the standard Avatar sets, again, focusing more on the human side of things, but still one of the ones I was really excited to get, especially for that kind of helicopter-like vehicle right here, which is a very cool one to put together. Now, of course, do stay tuned, because we have been publishing regular reviews of each of the Avatar sets, going from the smallest all the way up up to the largest, and after that we will be going through a mega review of every single one of the 4 minifigure compatible Avatar sets that have been released so far in 2022, showcasing what they look like when combined together. So stay tuned for that and let me know down in the comments below, what do you think of the set? If you own it, what has been your experience putting it together? Thank you all so much for tuning in, and I hope you've been enjoying these reviews. Like and subscribe for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. Thanks, and bye for now.